So, a lot of people know each other, but just so that we're sure that everybody knows everybody, we'll go around here and introduce ourselves.
I'm Dave Robbins, I'm the Planning and Zoning Administrator.
I'm David Roby and I'm an alternate.
I'm John Stadler, member.
I'm Tim Cook, member.
Eric Furstenberg, I'm a regular member.
And Amber Boland, and I'm an alternate.
So when you speak, just so everybody knows who you are, so you say your name. You could even say what road you live on if you want to reveal that classified information. And let's get started. Because you're a select group, I thought we'd have more people show up. But that means that you're very motivated to be here for the senior housing issues. So any and all who would like to give their opinions, their ideas, please do so. Anybody to start? Well, all right. Well, that's an interesting point. That's an interesting point you bring up. So let me see if I can get things started. We were just talking a little bit before everybody showed up that David, you were saying that there are an awful lot of properties, expensive properties, but expensive or not, everything takes money. But there are properties available in Lyme that could conceivably be used for senior housing or other things. And it might take, it would be nice if Andrew Winter were here because we could see whether it's really feasible to get, maybe apply for grants for these things, or it will take getting people with a lot of money involved, or exactly what it will take. But there are opportunities in Lyme, and I'm not just talking about the zoning opportunities where you can individually do things like accessory dwelling units, things things like that. What were the properties?
Right now, some big areas I noticed is you have the old Tarn building here, that is for sale. Kelsey's house right next door is for sale. It's my understanding that there may be other properties in that block that will be coming up for sale in the very near future. So there is a huge area over here with, probably 15 to 20 acres of land that's now available. If you look at something like Kelsey's house, that's eligible for conversion into more than one dwelling unit. You could put easily, without any changes to the house, two houses or two apartments in there. He's got a very large barn that could easily be converted to another apartment for immediately. And then by the zoning, you're allowed after 5 years to convert that to up to 6. So just on that one piece, you could conceivably have 8 units right there. That doesn't include any of the land out back. It doesn't include going to the Tarn building, which we have talked to Earl Strout about converting that to housing.
And I actually think he did meet with Andrew Winter.
I believe he did.
I don't know what came of that. And I remember in the discussions that Vicki was even, I didn't quite understand, but she seemed to think that there was a way that could be considered 2 buildings and convert, you could have a conversion to 12. I don't know whether that, I don't know exactly what she was talking about, but you could certainly do 6. And then of course there's this might be something completely different, but the Pondview, they've been in several times over the years, and that site is in the commercial zone, so it has a lot of flexibility and a lot of potential.
there's a large piece of property with that, it actually goes quite a bit back. If you look behind the pond, there is a very nice area that could be developed. It would give you shielding from Route 10. You would have, a nice pond in front. You then, plenty of land in back, so you wouldn't be up in front. You'd have to take down the original building, but I don't think anybody would consider that a huge loss. But and in that case, there's also, I understand, that there are no services out there, but because it is in a commercial zone, you could bring in a small store, restaurant, and something that would, service that community.
And how much land, Lenore Bolton, how much land is?
I want to say there's about 80 acres out there. A lot of it goes up on the back hill, which is fairly steep. But there is a significant, and the commercial district only goes 1,000 feet back from the road. So, once you get up into the hills, that commercial district is no longer there, but.
And how much land, Corolla, how much land is with Elvis?
I think he has about 8 acres. He owns the field out in the back also, so there is a fairly good chunk of land there. And then, like I said, when you include the other pieces that are for sale there, you're probably getting up close to 15 acres.
No. Tell them what house is.
Oh, okay, it's just the one right across the street with the barns.
Martha, what's happening with the senior place up in Orford? You know?
I don't know the details. Tim, you might know more of the details. And Duncan Cooley mentioned to me last night that they had just put in a request for a block grant. They made a request for a block grant for the building that they're gonna be doing at that facility. So I know it's in that academy space, but
And the block grant, they're asking for it from where?
This was literally in passing during last, I don't know exactly.
Is it HUD?
Is it HUD?
I think, yeah, I went to one of the meetings and they
Oh,
were
okay.
discussing.
I haven't been to one of the meetings, so I really don't. I was just gonna ask.
Well, that might be an interesting thing to find out, what the funding,
I think they have someone in charge of it, who is like a developer.
Yeah,
in charge
Who
of
does-
raising the fund?
Well, of everything.
the business.
Yeah, I haven't talked to Carl Schmidt recently, so I haven't heard
Yeah,
recently.
you would know. I went to.
Well, I have actually not ever been, I haven't been to anything about it, so I
Oh.
don't know,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
But it was still I think in the hands of this other entity,
I think it,
who's developed places before for senior housing.
And it's a non-assisted senior senior apartments, mixed income. So that's the only bit I know, sorry.
I did hear there was an issue, I think the town has to vote on it, and I think there was an issue of the town not supporting it at one point. This was back in the spring.
Ann
So,
sounded very positive about it yesterday, which I was just surprised
At
about,
that,
so I
at
don't.
that meeting, there were a couple of negative people, but a couple, a lot of people were okay.
yeah.
and they did vote at that meeting, I think it did pass, if I remember correctly.
So anyway, in terms of people interested in actually getting a senior housing project going, it might be a source of very good information.
Does anybody know what Kendall's doing there, the area there adjoining them that used to be
They used
the
to-
housing for the
Yeah, I
college?
think their plan is to expand to the south.
And the pollution that was supposed to have flown under that from Corel has been remediated, or just,
Not, apparently,
people are old enough that
just
it's not gonna
a
kill them, is
problem.
that the?
It's just, don't think about it.
Yeah.
I don't know how that's been handled, but there were the flow that went over to went over to the school and everything. They ran a lot of tests, and people seemed to accept that it wasn't a problem.
And then Thetford, oh, sorry.
Yes, you are.
Ross McIntyre
I
from
thought so.
Lamphir Hill Lane. It gets complicated.
Yes.
You talk senior housing, and I think it would be helpful for this group to think of the range of senior housing, which runs the gamut from cooperative housing to individual houses, to apartments. But then you add in a whole lot of other factors. Are these people able to look after themselves? Do they need help? Are we talking about a assisted living facility, where there is somebody designated who provides help, or a system that provides help? And then you go beyond that to a nursing home, and as soon as you take the step where there is possibility of federal reimbursement via whatever mechanism, then you end up with fire codes, door widths, handrails, etc. And things get pretty complicated in a hurry. And finally, if you get to a place that is expected to care for a person from the time they decide to retire into a protected space somehow, and then die in that same space, you've got a major operation like Kendall. It's important, if you're gonna be looking after people, to be in an architectural design that allows the caregivers, or the people responsible for the people receiving the care, to work efficiently and cheaply, because no matter how you do it, you're gonna be talking thousands of dollars per month to care for people in this setting, if they are requiring real assistance or daily care. And so as we think about this in the town, I think a good place to start would be, are we talking about some places that have reliable utilities and will keep people warm and happy, who are able to take care of themselves? Or are we talking somewhere beyond that? And before you start thinking about buildings and cutting up, making apartments, that decision should be made, because how you proceed is going to save a lot of money in the long run if you have a plan that is based on something that we all agree on.
That's a very good point. And actually, I was thinking, I went to the aging in place meetings for years, and you can all correct me when I'm wrong. I won't say if I'm wrong, but my general takeaway is that at least the group of people who were showing up were interested in a place where relatively able-bodied people, but where you could count on, over the years, as the years went by, there would be some options. But I don't, well, people from the Aging in Place group, what are you thinking?
So, John, let me play off what Ross was saying, that I think that is a big spread. I think it's not clear, certainly it's clear that nobody in the Aging in Place group was leaping up and saying, yes, I want to organize a skilled nursing facility here in Lyme. I mean, just not in our skill set. And I think, Ross, your point about what we want to provide for people, if taking a house and dividing it up into a couple of apartments is good enough, then the current ordinance exists. But you're not going to get to the kind of setting where people can live independently and have some community, maybe there's some assisted care in individual homes. I think it's not up to the ordinance, it's not up to the planning board, it's not up to the town really to figure out how to go about building something that's a little bigger than a home that gets cut up into a couple apartments. I think it is important, though, to say what is allowed in the ordinance. We all know senior housing is expensive. We all know housing is expensive, let's start there.
Housing is expensive.
Seniors may well be very price sensitive. And, you know, I said it in the spring, but it's still true. Land is expensive here. If there's no facility for putting multiple homes on a parcel, land is going to remain expensive, homes are going to remain expensive, and so the challenge that I throw out to the planning board is what accommodations, what even changes to the ordinance can be made to allow more dense development, to allow multiple units on a parcel that would be a first step in providing places for people to live. Seniors, if we want to focus on seniors, but places for people to live. You've said to me multiple times, John, that if the Pinnacle project wanted to be senior only, we could get approval in a minute. And I think I'd very much like to see consideration from the planning board or somebody in town to amend the ordinance to allow that.
What I recall saying
Yes.
to you is different to what you recall my saying to you. I was saying that if you guaranteed some senior housing and workforce housing, guaranteed it and committed to it, that you would be much more likely to be successful. That's what I said to you. At least that's my recollection of what I said to you.
Well, okay. Would the planning board?
You know what I would like not to do is to make this about your development.
Good, that's fair, that's fair. But,
Actually, it's what we were talking about were really the range of approaches to senior housing. And I think that's a good starting point. In terms of approaches the planning board can take, we've been over this a million times, and every time we get into this discussion, it becomes about your development, and I'm sure that's going to come up again. So in terms of your development, we can save that for them.
So, is it unthinkable that it would be valuable to have more than one home on a parcel, or 6 homes? You have a large structure, you get 6 homes on a parcel. Is that unreasonable?
I believe that it is possible to have multiple homes on a parcel under the current ordinance.
Okay.
This is always going to get back to the density levels that you're talking about. And we can have the whole evening then be about that. There are approaches that can work. And we've had the discussion a million times about your project.
I think there's, what the planning board is trying to understand is what it is that people would like for elderly housing. What type of form do you want it to take? And then you can look at the ordinance and say, well, where are the impediments and what can be done about that? But without knowing ahead of time what it is that people would like, it'd be, like throwing darts at a dartboard. You have no idea what it is that you're trying to get to. And
Yeah,
so
I mean,
that's-
I went for, I don't know whether it was 2 or 3 years, but to a lot of aging in place meetings, because I was very interested. And after all that time, it was really hard to get a handle on what people were interested in, because everybody had a different interest, literally. One person who was there who was really committed to pocket neighborhoods, and I'm not talking about the definition that you use, but the more traditional definition was, he was very committed to it. He went out and he bought an affordable place. Other people kind of went over here, some people disappeared, but there was never a consensus, and there was never seemed to be enough energy coming together to really go in a particular direction. So, I mean, one of the things that I'd like to come away with from the forum is a sense, number one, of how much interest there is in senior housing, and how much, for lack of a better way of putting it, how much impetus or energy there is behind it. Yeah, Martha?
Martha Tecca from Orford now, I'm working with the Aging in Place Committee and Community Care of Lyme. The point that you've just made, John, which is the fact that there isn't sort of one way, one call for senior housing is really the important one, and with the research that's been happening across New Hampshire, I sent you stuff, I don't know if it was passed around, or if you've seen it all before.
I didn't get to read through all of it, but I got to read through some of it.
So one of the things that folks are seeing is increasingly seniors are not looking for places that are senior-only places to go. When they think about senior housing, it's housing that is appropriate for seniors and where people can be for a long time. And you were talking, Ross was mentioning earlier, wider doorways and handrails, and there's sort of an encouragement for that sort of accommodation to be in more kinds of housing, not just we have to build certain senior housing with those accommodations for folks who have disabilities, which is what that's not about age, that's about having certain disabilities. And so
Well, but it's also about age. It's also, I mean,
it is about
realistically,
age, but it's about disability that goes along, specific kinds of disability that go along with age, as opposed to purely about about age. And I guess that's an important piece to keep in mind as well. That is not only for aging, but also there are also disability-friendly facilities. But the zoning piece that seems to be, communities across the state are thinking about is how can we, rather than how do we in our small town figure out what perfect thing can happen within our borders for some, enough seniors, is how can we make sure that the zoning allows the choice, the range of things that people may want to do. Probably density, however you think about it, is actually a real piece of the conversation. Where can we in fact have sufficiently dense, small groups of houses that it's reasonable for folks to
I would say the
live and get
key
around and
phrase
walk
would be
around.
that's reasonable.
Sure, fair enough, but I mean, that density piece is what I think sort of the zoning isn't about how do we make one specific project work, but the zoning is about how do we make it possible for people to age in a range of ways they'd like to.
Actually, I think it's both things.
Yeah, well.
It's both things. It is about how a group of people, if it's 6 people, could come together and do something, or different numbers of groups. Anything that's workable and reasonable.
Yeah, I agree with that, it sounds like the ask is, what is the thing y'all wanna do? That's not.
I mean, that's really me, because
But
I spent so much time at those meetings and.
Realize that's not the question.
And came away with, just kinda like, well, that's not really happening.
Exactly. exactly.
Yeah,
John, let me introduce myself. I'm Nils Johnson. I'm an Ohio lawyer. I'm also a New Hampshire lawyer, and I'm an elder lawyer back in Ohio. It's about half of what I do. I do business law and real estate as well. Family has done some development over the years, and we have actually built apartments with the wide doors and the rails and handles and so forth to accommodate people with disabilities. My mom passed away in December, and so she was just shy of 93. And 92 great years and one challenging one. But with her and my father a few years before that, and clients for 40 years, I've dealt with these very issues. What people need. It's hard to say what you need. We don't like to think about these challenges until it hits the fan ski. And so until your parent gets sick, or your loved one, or you yourself get sick, you're really not thinking deeply about these matters. So the committee, I'm co-chair with Matt Copeland of the Lyme Community Development Committee, and we look to be a resource for certainly you guys. What we're trying to do is to reach out to the planning agencies locally. Sunapee, Upper Valley Regional, met with Ann the other night from Grafton County. I've talked to the UNH Extension people, talked to a consultant who has represented Lebanon, for instance, from Concord, and trying to not do anything except just develop what the needs are, what the challenges are, what the impediments are, what people want. And people always have, the more people you talk to, the greater number of good ideas that you get. But one of the things, early steps we did, I attend Hanover Rotary, and Jason Purdy runs a big senior facility up in Littleton. And Jason plugged me into the regional trade association guy who's big dog, who was sort of in charge of senior housing, the trade association for much of New England, and had a long talk with him. And he says that to attract on a business operation with critical mass, you need at least 85 to 100 beds, 100 facilities. Otherwise, you can't. It's not efficient. You can't get staffing that makes sense and so forth. We just built one of these I was chairman of a similar community of a committee back in our little town of Canfield. Some people call it Cornfield, Ohio. And we went through the same thing. We didn't have a tax base. We were residential, sort of a bedroom community, and the people were choking, particularly fixed income folks. So we were forced to think about land uses. And anyway, so the housing guru said you need 100 beds. We just got one of these built in Canfield, so we took a piece of ground that generated 18,000 in taxes, 11 acres I think it was, and now it's generating 300 and some thousand dollars, a big chunk of which goes to the schools
So
back there. So
with 100 beds, so it was.
it had 85.
85 beds, so 85 people, or what does that mean, 85 beds?
85 beds, meaning this was assisted living, and there was also skilled nursing care if people's situation sort of degraded. But, a lot of these, as I think it was somebody said earlier, you start out maybe even with a condo or something that's fairly independent, and then maybe you moved into a place in a facility where it's...
So I guess my question is Lyme interested in having something equivalent like that? Would Lyme be interested in an 85-bed facility like this?
And I don't know the answer, but I'm saying that's one of the things that has come up in preliminary discussions of not generating a bunch of additional students, okay, just speaking frankly, and having a density so that it generates real estate taxes. I mean, that's the key here, is how do you get additional, how do you improve
Well,
your
an
tax
additional
base?
key is, you know, is this something that the town's gonna want? And that the only way to find that out is to speak to the town. What was the population of the town?
This, the town, the city is 7,500.
7,500.
But it's part of a bigger area where when you throw in the township, there's about 15,000. So it's a large area. It's, you know, it's not totally dissimilar from this area,
But we
but
probably have full-time emergency services available in that
Police,
area?
police and fire, you mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Sure, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Well, no, we have a volunteer fire department.
for 15,000.
Yeah,
Wow.
well, part of this is volunteer, there's a core of one or two, and then when the
Yeah,
siren goes off downtown, everybody gets in their car and comes in.
yeah.
Because it sounds like with the range of, like what Ross was saying, you know, where you have, you know, you can take probably an ordinary house and have that meet a lot of people's needs. And then you kind of move up this apex to something more like Kendall, which sounds like a fairly intensive operation. It seems like it's, you know, it's like almost a marketing issue, you know, what is the demand for something like a Kendall and Lyme?
Well, I mean,
Probably
I
just,
think if you're
a small
approaching it
number.
strictly from a revenue sense, that can make sense, because that'll produce revenue. What are the side effects of that? What are the, you know, what's the infrastructure that's needed? Does Lyme have that infrastructure? How would that impact other services? It's hard to, you know, just look at that as an isolated thing.
because you probably wouldn't have 5 of them in a town this size.
5 of them?
Right.
Probably not.
No, I'm talking about.
Probably be like
One.
one.
No,
would be
185
Yeah.
would be, you know,
So
significant.
the question is, you know, with something like Pond View being an obvious, I mean, would that be the obvious location for something like that?
That's an obvious location for a lot of things.
Right off of Route 10.
I mean, that
It's
has a
an
lot of
accolade.
flexibility.
You know, we're looking at some of the, you know, where you have 85 beds, I'm not sure exactly, you know, engineering-wise, what the sewer, septic. Lyme does not have any public septic, so it all have to be on-site. That is something, you know, Rich can speak to, you know, the designs that you had to do for half that.
Well, no, we actually have
Or not be about,
84 bedrooms, 84 beds in the
Yep.
Lockland Lodge, so comparable size.
yeah, comparable size, so, you know, you need to, you know, that's going to limit where you can put this, because you need to have suitable areas for sewer, you know, as I was telling you, the big block of land over here is for sale. Unfortunately, there is a wetland that everything drains into, and, you know, would that be, you know, suitable for something that size? It would be questionable. So that's something, you know, and then that's also a huge expense to be added into any type of large development, because you're not just gonna be able to run a pipe to the public system.
I think hydrologically, it's not too bad around here, just because you've had all this valley fill erosion over the years, so I think this, generally speaking, the soils here probably perk fairly well.
Well, they really vary. There's a lot of ledge that comes up that I've seen. There's a lot of areas where you have, you know, where this stuff has come in, but it is brought in a lot of clay that does not perk well.
Right.
So finding areas that, you know, there's some beautiful places. If you look, a very good example would be Mr. Tenson's lot on the corner of the East Thetford Road, where that very sharp corner is, where, this is right here, actually.
We happen to have a
We
picture.
have to have a picture. With the barn here. This whole area down through here, well, it looks like great soil, great area. It's all very hydric soils and is not suitable for a septic. And so, you know, where you look and see, say, hey, this looks like a great place, you find that there is, you know, Rich, you know, can attest for them, they have one suitable area right where the hill drops down and levels out. They have an area that has a very suitable, but a lot of it is hydric soils or wetlands.
The glacier blessed us with a lot of sand and gravel up there.
Right.
The bad news is, it's up the hill.
Exactly, so everything has to be pumped up the hill, which the system that was designed for Loch Lyme Lodge, I don't know what the cost, it was never permitted, so I don't know what the construction cost, but, you know, looking at the large pumps that had to be put in, and, you know, a generator backup to, in case power goes down, to be able to pump that uphill.
Right.
You know, that's
Not
all
inexpensive.
Not inexpensive at all. And you know, something that has to be factored into that type of project.
Sure, I mean, I hear you.
Yeah.
But that doesn't condemn all development
Oh,
for the end of
not at all.
time, because that's why you can engineer anything, I mean, you can put a garage on the moon if you want. So it's just, it's a
Yeah.
business cost, somebody has to analyze it, see if it works.
Yeah,
Rose McIntyre again. There are retirement situations all over this state. And if Lyme didn't have zoning, if we had different zoning, we would have entrepreneurs coming in here wanting to build a senior facility of some sort. They come in and they build one, and it goes up quickly, and it's taking clues from design of other facilities around the place, and then most of them are pretty well built. And, but they all cost money. And I think our problem here in Lyme is generated more by the fact that New Hampshire doesn't have an income tax, and our real estate taxes are high, and people, when they get older and stop working, can't easily afford Lyme's taxes. And
100%.
there are only a couple of ways to handle that. One is to get them into real estate that costs less, and there are two ways to do that. One is a crummier house, and the other is to put more people on the same lot with a better quality house. Now, if we allowed if we changed the dimensions and regulations concerning our the 750 feet for a, what's called?
The ADU.
Accessory dwelling units.
The
Separate
external,
dwelling.
that's for the external, there is no limit on the internal, the external has a 750
Yeah.
limit.
And the requirement about being on the same septic system.
Actually, is it still, no, I think that's gone, because the state, you can check me on this, David, but I think what happened was that used to have to be on the same one, but the state didn't have an ADU statute, wrote one, it was only for internal ADUs, so we kept our external one, which the state doesn't provide, and because of their wording, I don't think you have to be on the same one anymore, but David can check me on that.
I think that the way it's worded now is they have to be either within 100 feet of each other or on the same
Yeah.
septic. So I think if they can be, if they're further apart, they can be on.
But the issue with that, of course, is that an older person could bring in a manufactured, high-quality thing like they're now building down on White River, that's well insulated and is zero net energy, and put it on the lot and rent the house out to the young family. But now you've got two buildings on this lot, and what happens when these people die and they want to subdivide and sell
You
it,
can't, with an ADU.
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
You're talking about with an ADU.
Yeah, so
you
you
can't
have to think of
subdivide.
what the town would look like once every lot has two places on it, and there's a lot of agitation to change the rules about subdivision. So but that's one option. The other option, of course, is to say, okay, here's a place where we're gonna allow a lot of building in one spot, or here's a building, for instance, I just walked through a building down in Manchester, Vermont, which was built as a retirement community about 15 years ago. The builder and the architect and everyone else connected with it lost their shirts, went bankrupt, and it ended up being a girls' school until they ran out of bad girls who needed to be in the school. And now it's just been purchased for about $120 per square foot, plus about 20 acres of land included, and is privately owned by a couple that owns a 85-bed unit in Williamsburg, Vermont, and they are now opening it as a assisted living facility and nursing home, including memory care unit. And the building is beautiful. They got it for a song. And they're gonna make money. The memory care unit will cost $7,000 a month.
You're supposed to say the memory care unit,
Yeah,
Yeah, so, and I can't, but we don't have any, we don't have an old warehouse or a factory building that's big enough and old enough to think about. But you look around the towns in our area,
How big are the Tarm?
there are lots of, take a look at what's along the river in Claremont. There's enough space there for a lot of old people, should the people in Lyme wanna go down there. And that's part of the problem. If you've grown up in this town, you wanna stay here.
Well, even if you haven't grown up in this town, you might want to stay. How big are the Tarm buildings?
I don't know off the top of my head.
They're fair size.
Yeah, it's big, but it's.
But in your mind, could that be converted into like, under our zoning right now, be converted
Well,
under our density?
we're talking about different possibilities, and I think what the board's gonna do after this meeting is consider these issues.
But if someone came today to the town of Lyme and said they wanted to build a Wheelock Terrace, would we have a place to direct them to that would suit us today? I don't think our zoning allows for a Wheelock Terrace in the town of Lyme.
I would,
I think you would be limited, I think, in discussions, I think, Vicky had talked about that there's really two buildings that are just connected over there, and so a conversion would allow you 12 units.
Okay.
So, the answer would be no, you're not going to get an 85-bedroom.
Right. But there is no place in Lyme.
for an 85 bedroom,
For an 85 bedroom.
I doubt it.
well, with the existing zoning.
With existing
But-
zoning.
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Right, and I'm just
Yeah,
saying,
I doubt it for an 85
which is
unit
why we don't
place.
have anybody knocking on our door
To have an
consider
85,
Right.
yeah.
And if
What
we,
would the septic,
They're not going on.
Think
Yeah,
about,
and we'll help, somebody's talking.
Yep.
I was just, I mean, what would the septic system look like for an 85?
I don't know.
I think
so,
Rich-
I mean, we know, it's, you need a certain size, it's manageable.
So yours is about,
what is
what is
that
yours
size?
cost? I mean, what is
I mean,
yours
it's north of $250,000, but that's not, at $100 beds, let's, just because the numbers are easier.
Right.
It's $250, $2,500 a
I
bed.
bet, yeah.
So, I mean, that's not impossible.
No, it's not impossible.
I mean,
It's
and so,
expensive.
in fact, a 4-bedroom home is gonna have a septic system that's at that order of magnitude. $2,500 a bed.
It's gonna be more than that. It's gonna be probably
Or more,
Say
right.
More than that.
So this is not impossible. So I think,
Well,
septic is-
as Niels was saying, nothing is impossible. It's a
Yeah,
question of,
right.
of balance,
Mhm.
that's all.
And those are, you're looking for people who can pay to be in those facilities, right? So
Right.
are we trying to solve the problem of people who have plenty of money
Well-
to find a place to stay, or are we
Yeah,
trying to
well,
solve the problem
but,
of
I mean, this is
affordable?
part of the, what's valuable for, I think, for the board about tonight, but that's also, we're hearing a lot of different motivations. One is how do we get revenue? The other is how do we actually care for people who don't have a lot of money or don't have that type of money? How do we make all these different things work? Or how do we get a mix of those things? And I think it's valuable for us to hear the different concerns and the different possibilities.
Yeah.
One of the interesting meetings we had with Julia Griffin who's the town manager in Hanover.
Yeah, I know.
And she's in Rotary up there, and I've known her for a number of years. Very sharp gal. She was talking about the Guile Road, I think it's called Guile
Yeah.
Road. 116 units, 4-story. Hidden away down in kind of the valley pretty well, but
On the old dump site.
yeah.
Yeah.
One of the issues in our preliminary discussions is, well, if you build, more housing, more kids, more costs. And pushback has been, well, that's not necessarily bad. I mean, kids are good, young families are good and vibrant, and, that makes a dynamic community. But in her experience, and the consultant from Concord echoed this the other night, 116 units, you would think there would have been 50 kids, maybe 16. So the people living there, you're gonna have some retirees, you're gonna have some young professionals working at the hospital or the college. The young professionals are getting married later in life, many aren't having any children, and though when they have them, maybe they're not having, 3, or maybe having 1 or 2. So their experience there, they actually, from a tax viewpoint, made out on the deal because their costs didn't go up, their revenue went up correspondingly more. And Steve Arnett Consulting in Concord said pretty much the same thing in his experience. I think he talked about Lebanon, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And a couple other towns where they predicted that you were gonna have 1.4 kids or whatever it was, and it turned out to be 0.5. And so, we're finding out with our little bit of investigation we've done, that things that you assume to be true and ain't necessarily so, that you really have to turn the rocks over, as I did when I was a kid going fishing. You gotta turn a lot of rocks to find a crayfish or bait. You gotta look and cross-examine and dig and see what the facts
I
are.
think, it's a given, you gotta dig and look. In terms of percentages, let's just say it's unpredictable. You can go on the assumption it's gonna be like that, but you really don't know until you look, and you're looking after the fact in that case. I think in terms of these really much bigger, denser developments than Lyme has ever had, two major issues occur to me immediately. One is the town interested in changing the zoning to accommodate that degree of intense development? And then the other is one of infrastructure. At what point does the town, if it chooses to go in that direction, have to invest in serious, major and costly infrastructure? And what is the payback, and is there a payback at that point? And how delayed is the payback? Is it 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road? So those two issues are the first two that jump out at me.
While you're talking about the infrastructure, I think the infrastructure plays a role, or infrastructure and services, I'm gonna put those together in a bucket. They play a role if you build one of the larger, more dense things. There's also the possibility of not doing a lot of building, but adding some infrastructure and services that make it possible for folks who are, if we did something about transportation, if we did something about certain kinds of services, getting people to people's homes, another option is that people can stay in homes that are in a less dense area. So just as we think about the overall planning picture, where does the money go and where does the change go? Let's not just forget infrastructure in the conversation instead of massive building, or,
Yeah, I mean,
it's just another piece
in
of the
terms of
puzzle.
that infrastructure, I would agree, but I was really talking about, like, putting in a
Sure,
a
no,
sewer system.
I'm just
With
talking about
that,
the whole range is.
absolutely, makes sense to me. Yes?
Lenore Bolton.
Hello, Lenore.
I've been sitting here quietly, but I am passionate about this. interested in senior housing and individual housing, similar to Vermont, but it could be something else. It just, I've been renting for about 8 years, and there's no tax benefits to renting. I also haul my laundry down to Lebanon, so, you know, this is like, it's not a great situation. And I'm getting older, so it's harder.
More experience. We
More
don't say
experience,
older.
right?
Older.
Ergonomically, yeah, I can do it. I would love to see a senior over 55 area. You know, I don't know how many units, but, you know, as far as, and with a gathering space that could be used for the town, or, you know, for multiple purposes, you know, intergenerational. I'm not so, I don't like the per se, the pocket neighborhoods, you know, tucked here and there. The sense of community is very important, and sharing, and, you know, possible, you know, getting available rides and that type of thing, and keeping, so you're not isolated. There is a strong need for senior housing. Bedford has gone through 10 years, you know, looking for a place, and there's, you know, they get close and then it comes back again. Orford has been several years, you know, doing their thing, and that will come. I think it's called A Head in Littleton, that is the overseer, and then there's.
What is the?
I think it's called A Head.
And what does that do?
They are doing like the major planning, financial, you know.
What are they? I mean.
It's a group that Orford has chosen, I guess, to develop this. There is an architectural firm, and I'm trying to think of the name, but he used to work with my brother, but I can't remember his name, but, so that they're working on it.
I guess what I'm trying to, is Ahead the group that's interested in Littleton, or is it?
No, they are developing the Orford project.
Oh, they're developing.
They're in their development.
Yeah.
AHEAD also is the fiscal agent of the new aging place village. They've just started village in Bethlehem, and AHEAD is their fiscal sponsor.
I think they're somehow
They're housing
connected
agency.
with Orford too.
They are, no,
Yeah.
they're a housing development.
And as far as, you know, what are the needs? I mean, you know, with the senior housing, I know there's a great need, but assessing the need, have we done a needs assessment for 85 beds of assisted, you know, living, or further? Do we need,
I
specific?
sure haven't.
So,
Yeah, no.
I'm not sure,
But
I'm not
just-
sure that
just
we
a
wanna
quick
look at it
question.
from that perspective.
Right.
Because I think you wanna look at it from, if you build it, they will come,
That's
as
the-
well as, are we taking care of people? We're providing the opportunity for the people here who
Have the
will
choice.
come and stay, that's great. But if we build it, they will come, and that brings the revenue to the town, you know, so we have to think about the
Well, I'd be heading
revenue.
to Claremont, and I can't afford the 7,000, right now, I mean, I
Right.
choose not to, you know, spend $7,000 a month, or whatever it is,
It's at least,
yeah. I mean, if it's Wheelock Terrace or something.
Right.
This town already has an over proportion of elderly people in it.
That's
We want
right.
another 85 people
Well,
who are over 65 or over 50, well, over 65 is better. But I mean, there's too
That's
many
right.
old people in town already.
you think so?
Yes.
That's not going up.
Interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think part of that goes to, you know, what's the motivation? If the motivation is revenue,
Right.
strictly revenue, you know, it can make a lot of sense, but from the planning point of view, I mean, if that's your charge is, you know, how do we find revenue for Lyme, then what you're saying, I think, you know, makes a lot of sense. But my point of view, from a planning point of view, you know, I'm not gonna approach it from a strictly revenue point of view. There's far too many other pieces of the puzzle that come into play.
I think, if I may respond to that, we, you know, the charge from the selectmen was, a number of them, but one of them was housing, taxes, real estate taxes are going up 4.3% a year, which means 15 years out, approximately, all of our taxes are gonna double. A few years, I've been here 10 years, and typically there's a handful of houses on the market. Somebody said there's 28 now. And I don't think it's a coincidence, that's, you know, after the real estate taxes have gone up the last couple of years. And so, you know, I mean, there's a lot of things that you gotta look at. What do the people want? What kind of business activity are they willing to tolerate? And I don't know. I think we have to find out and ask them and network and try to get a hold on that. But he's exactly, I mean, I've done development in Ohio. I'm the third generation guy, and it's build it and they will come. I mean, if you create.
I don't have any doubt
If you
that
create
they will come.
So one of the things I wanted to add, Stuart Arnett was saying there's something called form-based zoning, which is interesting, where you say, if you want to, you don't just say you can build anything and two-dimensional here, you say, what's the form of the thing you're gonna build? You have to replicate, your setbacks are such that the buildings are near the street and the parking is behind so that it's hidden, and you have to use forms that might echo the architectural stuff that we have going on in our nice little New England village. And you know, that you can get a hold and limit and control the types of things that, you know, build it and they will come. Well, they gotta come in this form, they gotta come in a way that we wanna have them here. But I've seen that in Ohio, a number of little towns that you wanna build a CVS, that our neighboring town said, okay, you've gotta build it with these architectural elements, and that's what they did, and it looked fine when they were done. So I mean, this is complicated, and I don't think, it's gonna take a long time to kind of get a whole grip on this, but hopefully everybody's flexible and we can try to suss out the attitudes and possible responses.
Yeah, that's what the forum's about.
Yeah, and just thinking about property taxes, which everybody does, obviously, I think one thing we have to remember is that our town budget's $9 million and $7 million of that is the school. And actually, our town part of the budget, I think in the last however many years, 6 or 8 years, has actually gone down in real dollars. So
Until the flood.
Yeah. But, so in other words, the school is really the driving force. So whatever, if people are concerned about taxes, we have to think about what's happening with the school.
I agree.
Yeah.
And I would also very much agree with, you know, all of this goes back to federal and state policy, because everything gets pushed down. From the federal, it gets pushed to state, and from state, it gets pushed to the municipality, so that there's so much pressure for a town like ours to raise revenue. And frankly, I think it's unconscionable as a policy to put localities, you know, having us in a position where we're all here thinking like, how the hell are we gonna raise this money to pay for our roads, to pay for our school, because we don't wanna pay taxes in New Hampshire, or because we don't wanna pay taxes in the country. And it devolves down to this, it devolves down into these, you know, us sitting here in a locality talking about really difficult issues because on the state and federal level, they've just absolved themselves of these issues. And it's really frustrating and I think morally wrong. There.
Yeah, and one of the real tricks of the whole thing is, you know, we clearly we need to do an assessment. It's wonderful that this number of people here, but, you know, we have to force somehow a broader input of what people need or what people want. The problem is that the thing you're building is further out than you might even imagine what you want. That's the problem with this. It's not like we're gonna get a sense for, that's why it's challenging to do the senior housing planning, is because people aren't imagining what they might want in 10 years, and yet the development's gonna be there in 10 years. It's not next year.
Well, that's the other thing, is the time, you know.
That's my point, that's time.
Getting elderly myself is like, well, and as it goes forward, it's like, we're talking about projects that are gonna take a good deal of time.
Exactly.
And that's
If-
problematic.
If I could just say some good news, when we started this same thing that we're doing here tonight in Cornfield, Ohio, 6 or 8 years ago, it was very frustrating. I tried to get the people to think about sewer extensions. The first meeting, the lady said, I don't want to talk about sewer extensions, we got to talk about the new community center we need. And so finally you get people educated to understand where the taxes come to build the community center, if that's what you're gonna do, go. And you begin to get people in place making decisions over time that have a grip around the big issue. So Canfield now, we've got sewer extensions, we've got a 100-acre area that's going
Well,
in.
the only thing I've been on this board too long, and
Yeah.
a lot of people would agree with that. And
My point was, it
I-
takes time, and
everything
that's
takes
just-
time,
yeah.
but I'll just say about Lyme, I have not had any indication about people's yearning for sewer extensions or you know, serious sewage infrastructure, quite the
I
contrary.
don't think that's what we're talking about, but we're talking about taxes, and we're talking about if you don't do anything. My opinion is, let's do the minimal. I like it the way it is. But I'm not 16 anymore either, and I see my bill, which is already 3 times what it would be in Ohio, doubling in 15 years, and that's the problem. So, you know, we gotta think a little flexibly here.
And that's a statewide, that's a nationwide problem, right?
It
People
is.
just can't sit on their big properties and not have any changes to their lifestyle and expect that the money's gonna just come, you know what I mean? It is more expensive to sustain that, so there's also lifestyle changes that people who wanna stay on those properties need to be thinking about, in addition to just wishing the taxes would go down.
Has everybody had cookies? Because there's a big spread there and nobody's touched it. So be sure to have cookies and cider.
And thank you, Patty, for supplying
Yeah,
that.
Yes.
thank you very much. Thank you, Lenore. I mean, no, seriously, because I was like, there's somebody who knows exactly what she wants. That's
I
great.
work tomorrow, it's like,
Yeah.
Allergic to chocolate.
And Niels, it would be great, I'd like to take this opportunity to invite you and anybody else from your committee to make, you know, we'll make time, make an appointment with David, come in and talk to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us what you're up to, what you're thinking, what ways you can help us, and we'll certainly work with you.
One of the things we're doing is to apply to UNH Extension to see if they would help us do the community survey and a visioning process, which I was involved with in my old town.
I was involved with that here, and it was,
Yeah.
when I started, I was about 50 years younger than when it was over.
I know.
It's
But if you
grueling.
don't, people don't feel they had an
No,
oar in the
it's
water,
Time
and then,
again, so-
You have to, but it is grueling.
but
it's
hopefully
time
they'll
again.
buy in, and so we're making progress, I hope.
Anyway, I hope you will talk to David and come and see us. That would be great. Was this gonna devolve into a cake party, or does anybody have anything else to say?
The next forum is millennials, is
The next forum is millennials, and hopefully, we have a realtor who is a specialist in millennial issues, Lynn LeBombard, and she will be coming, and she has a presentation that she does, and I hope she actually, comes. We'll talk to Andrew and see whether we can get him to actually show up. Anyway, oh, yes.
And I just wanted to ask a question, because as I mentioned to you, and as you know, I'm part of the New Hampshire Alliance for Healthy Aging. There's not somebody else here who seems to be coming to those things, but do you want to know the things that are do you want me to forward to you the
Yeah,
things that's happening
yeah.
with the new Plan
Yeah.
New Hampshire and those?
If you send them to David,
If you-
David
all right, I
can-
didn't know
If
who.
you send things to me, what I can do is I can send it out to all the board members.
Okay, I
We
wasn't
avoid
even
the-
sure
I'll tell you,
who.
the things that you sent me are very interesting. the problem, I mean, the problem I'm having so far is like just catching enough time to read it all.
Sure.
It's so voluminous, but it's great to have.
But that's why I just wanted to make sure, I don't wanna keep spewing
Yeah,
stuff, it takes me a
yeah,
little.
send it to David, and then David can send it to everybody on
Because anything that we can do that just piggybacks on the work that others are doing, if they're putting together model zoning proposals that are age and millennial friendly, boy, that would make life easier for us to,
Yeah.
tweak other people's proposals rather than reinventing or inventing. Okay.
So John, when is this next forum with Lynn
the
LeBonheur?
millennials, I think, is the second, it's the second meeting next, in October, which would be what date?
I give it a date, just a second.
I guarantee you won't have any millennials here.
Be the 26th.
26, and we had planned on a third one, which would be, the first one is seniors, the second one is millennials, and the third is family. Right now, we don't have a family speaker, but we're still working on that.
And are you gonna try to get Andrew to come back, or?
We'll take that up
Okay,
post haste.
excellent.
It doesn't sound like it, but actually running out of meetings coming up because Thursday night, in November falls on Thanksgiving.
Of course.
So
Yeah, I think it's likely, if we do have him back, it'll likely have to be after probably after the winter. Because this is a busy season for us in terms of getting zoning amendments done and other things we have to do in cases and things like that. And I wouldn't be surprised to be seeing you, so.
That may happen, yes.
It could.
Could.
It could, and the
Mhm.
sun may come up tomorrow. Yeah.
If the real purpose for Andrew coming is to sort of informational, to sort of talk about the
Well, I
low-income
think
housing
I think it was
situation and
informational,
what he
but
knows.
also, I think it certainly for the people who are interested in, individually undertaking certain things, or with a small group, or maybe even a bigger group, he has a lot of experience about grants and funding.
He does, I was just gonna propose that if that's important, we might be able, I love it when Patty looks at it. We might be able, doesn't have to necessarily happen on a planning board evening, maybe we could just invite him to come and speak somewhere else, or speak up at the Academy
That's
Building
possible.
and put some chairs out and he can come and, we can
Yeah.
invite people to come, that's all I was saying,
Yeah,
if that seems
actually, that might be a
important.
good idea.
We don't have to work it
It's a
into,
great idea.
or Dow's, or somewhere else, we don't have to work it into the
Yeah,
planning board schedule.
that might be a good idea.
I wonder if, there's any point you're open to add Duncan Cooley or,
Vicky, let's just say very aggressively tried to get in touch with her and just never heard back.
well, I was
Dustin
thinking.
Cooley?
Yeah.
She was at our meeting.
Yeah, we're working with her, she's very helpful.
Yeah. She didn't get back
I
to
was
Vicky
thinking
in
specifically
terms of
about
coming to a
grants.
forum.
Yeah.
I was thinking specifically about grants.
Mhm.
Which whoever's the developer in Orford would also be knowledgeable about.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you have any experience around here, grants, not else.
In
Grants.
what
Just the
type of
grant
grant?
aspect, what might be available.
For,
What might be available for that kind of thing.
there is a MTAG, MTAG, Plan New Hampshire grant to help with consultants that might understand these issues. And the town is applying for that. It's not a ton of money, but it's enough to get the ball rolling.
Yeah, whoever it was in Orford, the guy who was in charge, maybe it was at that, I don't know, kept talking about grants, so.
Yeah.
In Ohio, we have grants out the yin-yang, but the state doesn't give you much help here, do they?
Well, not the
No.
state.
No.
Welcome to New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we're the people.
Now go home.
Yeah, right.
Are we gonna have a meeting, do you want us to leave?
What's that? No, you're welcome to,
So maybe-
you're, You're such a lovely audience, we'd love to take you home with us.
One more quick thing, because I'm gonna step out, we also have, the Mascoma Foundation. Mascoma Bank, the branch in Lyme, is, willing to help us out, they do give out grants. And, the manager there, Nate Hill, is a fan of Lyme, he strongly encouraged me to, for us to make use of that, as a resource. So, just in the future, but,
Great.
good night.
Okay,
Sorry,
good night.
I couldn't make it earlier.
All right. Well, one thing we do need to do is the minutes. It's a great spectator sport to watch us do the minutes.
First off, thank you
Oh,
folks for
thank
talking
you.
to us, for thinking about it. This is good.
Thank you.